Welcome. I'm Sean Lether. I want to welcome you to Hawaiian IANDS. I'm the host for tonight. Everyone watching on Facebook, special aloha to you, as well as you on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe to our Hawaiian IANDS YouTube channel. I am really thrilled to welcome our very special guest, David A. Williamson. For most of his life, David has been deeply affected by identity confusion, racial narratives, racial trauma, generational trauma, and rigid orientations towards ideology and personality. In 2017, David suffered a tear in his aortic valve that led to a heart attack 7 days later. It was during the heart attack that he had a profound near-death experience that forever changed him. And now he views his life very differently. David's going to share tonight about his experiences and how he continues to ground and integrate practical approaches to everyday life. David views life every day as an opportunity to imagine, feel, and create the reality that one wants to experience. David welcomes your correspondence related to interviews, collaboration, and personal consultations. His link is in the chat. Welcome, David. So glad to have you join us. You want to unmute? There
Yes.
you go.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about before the NDE, what was going on, and then the NDE, and then we can do some questions.
Okay. I started to add this part on it because it's something that I remember more of as I started sharing my life, in interviews. But I drowned at age 6. So even before the NDE that happened in 2017, part of the reason why I was so kind of disconnected from this experience was because that experience, I had visions, but about the future, and it was always very just a lot of death and very negative. And I was age 6, so it was pretty traumatizing for me, and it kind of led me to a lot of the sadness and just didn't really put in this because I didn't really feel like it was heading anywhere, positive. And then I also had after that, after drowning, visions of being in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then that really scared me, and I assumed that humans were going to do it again. So that was another thing that kind of made me not really so willing to engage, as much as in my life as probably others would have. But those experiences kind of put me in a direction of just depression. And then having the experiences in my childhood of seeing the Ku Klux Klan and seeing a lot of racially polarized and racially tense, interactions that informed, how I felt like I was supposed to behave here. I did have what in my mind, ideas that I thought could help, people in this life, but I didn't think that my opinions and or me would matter in this life. So, racism kind of made me shrink myself and just lose the desire to even try to participate because I didn't want to have to deal with repeated rejection and repeated judgment and things that I had gotten tired of at a very early age. And so it just made me angry. And I just, instead of trying to participate, I kind of just was just on the outside kind of critiquing and just angry, angry that the ideas that I valued and the people that I cared about were being disproportionately, impacted by economics, like the statistics in every category of quality of life. I was just paying attention to everything that made me more angry and that reinforced a position of just hopelessness. And I never, in those feelings and in that position of just constantly being triggered. I don't even, a lot of the things that I would have imagined as solutions, they probably weren't good solutions, because in that state, it's harder to think clearly, it's harder to solve basic problems, even in your own life, so I was, ineffective and just struggling in this life. But a lot of it was just my own ideation, my own just anger At that point, it was anger, so I really wasn't doing well in this life, but it made me sick, just carrying all of that anger and carrying that rigid orientation and just constantly repeating narratives and stories in my head that just congealed all of that stuff and didn't really give me an opportunity to see things in a different way. Led to a lot of health issues. I had digestive issues for a while before the hypertension, and then the hypertension, which led to the heart attack in 2017. And uh, you know, during I guess I can just go into the experience, but during the experience, the biggest things that I took from it, outside of any of the words, messages, anything I saw, was that there was no end. My awareness never really, it was a seamless from being on the gurney to looking at myself from above to leaving and going out into space. But the the conversation that I had with myself while I was above myself was definitely um, the part of the experience that allowed me to come back and consider a lot of things, because every word I heard, every phrase I heard, it wasn't just the phrase itself. It was a lot of information that came with it, like a lot of understanding, a lot of just recollecting, my life in the moments where those phrases were being uttered. I instantly saw how they related to my entire experience, as David, and so when I came above myself and I looked down, and one of the first phrases that I heard was he's dead. You used to be there. I understood that. I understood that I had the body that I was in was dead. It wasn't working. And I looked at it. I didn't really ever see my face. I don't know if it was because there was so many people around me, but I didn't stare very long at my body. I looked at it briefly. I didn't see my face, and I just started looking around the room. And saw the woman that was holding her face with both of her hands. And then the next phrase that I heard was his body, his mind, and his ego was dead. And for me, and I guess the way that was presented to me could have had a whole lot to do with the fact that I studied a lot of spiritual texts and Eastern philosophy, and that language was very familiar to me. So when I heard that phrase, the next question that I asked was, then what's next? Like what remains? And it just flooded in. The words flooded in. It was consciousness, awareness, soul, spirit, light, a bunch of words. And at this point, I feel how it feels, and I'm feeling it, and I'm enjoying it, but I'm still kind of acclimating and hearing these phrases. And the next phrase was, "You killed yourself with your personality," and you know, that meant a lot to me, because that is exactly how I died. It was all of a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, a lot of anger, but no action and no habits to that would in any way suggest that I am actually about the work of changing the things that I'm allowing to trigger me and anger me so much. So for me, that was a key, in coming back, is that I'm not going to feel without aligning my behavior to what it is that I'm allowing to trigger me in this life. So I'm not going to just allow my attention to be pulled to and fro and feel so much, especially in circumstances where I cannot do anything, to change the situation. So that is definitely I pulled, from my experience. But some of the realizations that as I move forward in life, and then that have helped me move forward in life, is that it's the identity thing. Because when I did leave my body and I was staring down, at my body, and after I heard those phrases, I did look up and go straight to the void. And in that void, it seemed like everything was there. It felt like love. It felt like home. It felt like all possibility was there. And uh, and moving through it, there was a moment of kind of hesitance, but not really fear, because it felt the blackness was dense and it felt almost tangible. But I mean, I moved through it and I saw things, faint images of faces, of I mean, of a lot of different things, just landscapes, just faint images of things. But nothing I could ever focus on and hold. It was always like a smoke cloud. As soon as I looked at it for any amount of time, it would kind of just fade away like smoke almost. And but I moved through that, and that seemed to be where my attachment to the person that I was, the experience that I had here, kind of was severed, because when I came back, I did not have an attachment, not only to the ideology, the identity stuff, but even the like my occupation. Like I'm not really passionate about the work that I do. I'm not passionate about a lot of the things that I was passionate about before. And even the idea of passion, like that in and of itself is my orientation towards that is a little bit changed, because it's kind of what killed me. So I'm pretty careful about what I allow my emotions and my nervous system to get triggered and pulled into, you know. So the identity thing for me now, the way that I see it, and I think it's just beautiful now, because I was so rigid in my orientation towards identity before, that even if there was an opportunity presented to me that was favorable, if it betrayed who David was, I wouldn't probably behave in a way that would allow that opportunity to come to fruition. And at the end of the day, I would probably feel, okay with not receiving the opportunity, because I didn't compromise, who I am, or, any principles that I may have been operating on. But but it wasn't, oftentimes my orientation, because I come from, kind of poverty, as far as my childhood, and I did kind of have some of these aphorisms like that were in my mind. Money is the root of all evil. And I kind of observed, and made a lot of generalizations about people who had money seem to be evil. So there must be some truth to it. The people who run this place seem to be running it, into the trash. So it's like maybe there's some truth to this. So I didn't have a healthy orientation towards money and abundance and those things. So my chosen personality really didn't make me open to sometimes to opportunities that were presented to me. And at the end of the day, I still, based upon my anger and my lack of self-awareness, never really blamed myself for any difficulty that I had in my struggles. It was always an external variable that did it. Or that was responsible for it. It wasn't the choice I made or the disposition that I took into an interview or a situation where I would like for a favorable outcome to happen. I just always, it was never me. It was always externally. And so that identity thing for me it was something that I was beholden to, almost a slave to, that disallowed me to have like a range of emotional expression and even just behavioral expression that would have allowed me to take advantage of opportunities that were being presented to me, because I was so committed to being this identity that I had chosen. And it was an angry one, serious one, and I didn't want to be played with. I took myself way too serious, was very angry, and that didn't really make myself approachable. And so it's, some of the outcomes were, kind of predictable when you carry yourself in that kind of way. But and coming back, I realized that I had been cynical about happy people. And I shared that with a friend I talked to recently that I knew in college, and I didn't connect with him because he was so happy all the time. And in hindsight, I look at how crazy that is, because I hadn't been happy. So I generally looked at people who were happy as they were not honest. They were disingenuous. No one is happy. There's not, look at this world. How can you be so carefree and happy in a world where all of these things are going on? Like, so I didn't trust happiness, so, so now as it relates to identity, even certain habits and certain behaviors that I never either engage because of my disposition, my chosen disposition or personality. I didn't learn it. Like I didn't learn the habits of happiness. I didn't learn the habits of abundance. I didn't learn the behaviors that go along with those ideas that allow you to become the thing that you are imagining inside of yourself. So for me, now it's a big part of my experience as it relates to identity and choice is observing people who are happy, observing people who are abundant, learning their habits, learning some of the behaviors that they engage in. And for me, yeah, and my buddy Zach, we just call it borrowing people's colored crayons, you know, and that's what the remainder of my life is gonna be. That is me observing people engage in behaviors that I did not allow myself to engage in, or things that I didn't allow myself to feel or experience. Observing people who are good at those things, and so that I can learn how to express those things and experience those things and broaden my range of expression, which was pretty limited before, you know. So for me, the identity part of it is that it's always a choice, and that if there's a part of you, like if you go into a situation speaking about how something that you are is probably what's going to limit, or affect the outcome, or positive or favorable outcome for you, then don't be that. That's a choice. Like sometimes we seem to, I don't know, like the way I felt like I was beholden to being that people had seen me be this way for so long. So no matter what the situation is, I still have to be that way, even when being that way might hurt the outcome of me having, what it is that I want out of a situation. So personality is always a choice. That identity stuff is always a choice. Even in a racialized world, like even like for what I'm experiencing, what I experienced is that I allowed the identity conversation to anger me and to uh, uh, my expression and my opinions in extreme ways. But if I really focused on what it is that angered me, a disparity, some of the police treatment, things like that, like laws that appear to be, black facing, because the numbers are skewed when it comes down to how they're enforced. Like those things angered me. But there is a logical way to address these things. There is a way to address these things and get change and get people, galvanized behind addressing these things, when you learn the system, or you learn how to address them, and you learn how to articulate what it is that's bothering you in a way that it becomes something that's not just centric and specific to you, but anybody is bothered by, the increased militarization of police. I didn't have to turn it into something that angered me and polarized my opinion so drastically. Had I just looked at the issue, articulated in a way where everybody, because I used to, what I started doing while I was still angry, and as I posted a lot of these videos, and now I don't feel good about doing it because I don't like to trigger people's nervous systems, and my nervous system was so triggered, and it contributed to my inability to pivot. So I don't like to trigger people's nervous systems, so I don't really post stuff like that anymore. But I used to post a lot of the brutality videos, and I would post some where white people would be accosted, or just really be treated horribly. One kid was killed, and I and I wanted to, at some point, I think, get white people mad about it too, you know. But what I'm realizing is that you build and you connect more with people with more positive energy and more positive just approaches to the same thing. Like just speaking about that in a way to where we attack we can even incentivize having low incidences of brutality or violence towards citizens. We can incentivize that and gather money to make that a real thing. Like we could pay for training, pay for facilities, and have a budget for that, versus just sitting around being angry about it not happening. We can incentivize making it happen, and when it doesn't, it hurts them, because now this money that we have used to incentivize them behaving a certain way won't be allocated if they don't behave a certain way. I mean, and I think that in the oligarchy, that's kind of how a lot of this stuff is done, and that's what we're kind of leaning into in this country, is that big corporations buy policy. And we might need to start looking at things in a similar way if we want change to happen, if we're not going to outright, buck the system. We might need to learn how to operate in it. And I think for me, that disarms me considering my problems in that way, considering my problems in a way that allows me to actually engage them, actually try to fix them, versus just feeling some way about them and never ever being able to move the conversation from feeling to actions. Um,
Hey, David, could
yeah,
we, so what I really want to know, and I think a lot of, when you left your body
yeah,
and you realize everything you thought you know is not the story about yourself and the world, what was that like at first when you saw the truth of the world and you? Like,
yeah,
what was that like?
yeah. Hmm. I mean, I guess the biggest realization is, the identity stuff was gone. I didn't have, and coming back and then and comparing the difference there, I didn't have memory really of being a human being. I didn't have memory of trauma. I didn't have memory of much of this as I was moving through space. But I mean, it's not. I don't think that it was inaccessible. It's just I think that I was like a child moving through space. Like I was just excited about traveling through space. Everything felt like love. Everything felt like one. I mean, I felt connected to everything. Um,
Did it feel weird though, that transition from the character David, the story David, to who you really are? Like,
it didn't feel weird. Everything was pretty seamless. Like I said, once I left my body, I immediately knew that he was dead. And from that point forward, he didn't really interest me. His story, his body, nothing about him interested me when after I left it. I was more so concerned about the woman in the room that was sad that I was dying, and the guy that was holding a defibrillator pad that was really concerned about me dying. I didn't feel fear or anxiety or any emotion that could be similarly, related to that. I felt one with everything around me, and there was no, like, I couldn't even anticipate something negative happening. I couldn't anticipate anything bad. I just felt connected to everything, and in that, it almost felt like there was an understanding, like almost seeing the framework, like how it works, and I think that compelled me when I came back to, like, faith and loyalty to me is more so to the system and how it works, and not necessarily to any small circle within the larger circle. Like if there's 8 billion plus human beings here, then my faith and loyalty is to all of them and the system that allows awareness to come and go in life that resides here. And that's the orientation that I think that I got from seeing things in space in that way, and experiencing that oneness, is that there is no circle here that is any more important than any other circle. It's just one big circle, and any uh any orientation that creates others and theys for me is, I can't embody that. I can't speak that. I can't repeat it, and it doesn't feel good to engage in it, because I don't. It's violent, and if once there's a other in a day, there's the eventuality of violence. You know,
so you truly saw that we're all one. There isn't another in a bay.
no.
So how do you see David now? Who is who is David compared to
Uh,
what you thought David was then?
um, he's a. I mean, some of I laugh because before my NDE, I was pretty cynical about matrix or digital, kind of explanations and theories about this reality. But now I'm a lot more open to it, and some of my language, it could reflect spiritual reality or digital reality. But I think that this machine, this avatar, this life that I am in, that is known as David, is amazing. I didn't have any real connection to this experience before, but being inside of this body and understanding how it works differently than I did before, it makes this a beautiful opportunity. And the biggest thing that I owe myself that I never allowed myself in 40 years is peace. It's just a flat nervous system. Is total sovereignty of as it relates to my attention. And I'm not gonna ever really let that go. Like I'm not gonna let my sovereignty, as it relates to my attention, go again. It's my attention. It's my creative capacity in this realm, and we use it responsibly. But you definitely have to use it if you want to have an experience here that's to your liking, or that's not just you being a leaf blowing in the wind. You kind of have to pay attention to what's happening around you and intend for something to happen. So.
Would you say you're more compassionate towards yourself now?
Far more compassionate towards myself. I didn't even know, like, outside of my body, the love that I felt outside of my body almost was like a light bulb. Like, you've never felt anything remotely close to that for yourself. You've never looked at yourself in any way similar that you're looking at this space and everything around you. You've never looked at yourself with that level of awe and reverence. And I think that the more I learn about how the body works and how and our spiritual anatomy as well as our physical anatomy, the more I look at this experience, this body, with reverence. It's something. It's amazing. It's amazing and it's perfect. The way that this is, no matter what we do here on this planet, how it's set up and the opportunity that is presented to us as awareness inside of these bodies is perfect. It's perfect. And I wouldn't have ever said that before because I absolutely hated being alive before, you know.
So what was that like? Because talking about body and this world is so into identity, everything, labeling. What was that like for you to be outside of your body and to know that we're not our bodies? Like, explain a little of that. How did that feel, and what did you learn from
that? The biggest thing I learned is that it was kind of like a relief when I initially came out of my body. It was like so this is kind of how it happened. Like, this is how it happens. And so it was like some of the things that I studied and kind of believed in my life, I experienced it very similarly than what I kind of imagined it would be. So some of it was like, wow, this is amazing, and like the the differences between how I imagined it and how I was experiencing it became, I was aware of that for a moment before I fully just kind of left here. Once I left here, really, there was no contrasting. There was no contrasting how I was before I left my body with how I was outside of my body. That was that moment of while I was above my body, looking at everything in there. That was in the emergency room area. That was the only time where I even had the capacity to contrast David's life with what was next. And then when I left, it was no more contrasting. Once I was in the void, there was no more contrasting. I didn't have any reference. I couldn't say when I was 5, I remember seeing something and it reminds me of this. There was no historical reference, once I left the emergency room.
So we have an interesting question that's along with what you're talking about right now. They want to know, did you feel you were a soul, or were you just pure energy, connected and interconnected to all else?
I think that's the same thing. I think
it's the same. You don't.
Yeah, that's the same to me. I was a soul that was energy and connected to everything, and it felt perfect. It didn't have confusion. It didn't have any attachment to the idea that I was before. It was It was perfect, and and the biggest desire that I had in that state after I got in space was to just travel space. I saw the light, and it felt like love. It was beautiful. It was very, very far away from me, up and to the right, and the emergency room was down and to the left, and it kind of like a L. And but I saw the light, and I just wanted to travel. I didn't. I thought that going to the light meant a different experience. Like it would have been the end of me being in complete control of how I wanted to travel. So I didn't choose the light. There were other things that I felt. Like I intuited in my guess, and it may have been things that I thought about when I came back, but it seemed like the light will bring me back. You know, just kind of like recycle me, back. So I didn't really, and that wasn't even a bad thing in my mind. I just wasn't ready to come back. So I didn't really want to go to the light because it felt like it would have brought me back, you know. So
It would have brought you back here.
that's what that's what I felt in that moment,
That's what you were thinking.
or just on an experience that wasn't of my choosing. You know what I'm saying? It's just another experience. I didn't want to go on another journey. I wanted to journey. I just wanted to travel, in my awareness, as my
Yeah.
awareness through space. I didn't want to go into another experience, into another form, or into another. I didn't care whether it was human or alien or whatever. I didn't want to go into the light and experience anything else. I wanted to just travel through space. So
Yeah, I get that. I fought the first time too to stay away from the light. But
yeah,
did you actually eventually go to the light?
never did. When I was resuscitated, I was traveling through space, and I kept looking back into the emergency room because I was concerned about the woman that was sad that I was dying. That was sitting in the back of the lady was sitting in the back left corner of the room. That was, she was holding her face, and she was really sad that I was dying, and that bothered me because nothing that I was experiencing was negative. So I was trying to figure out how to talk to her the whole time that I was anytime that I came back into the emergency room, I was trying to figure out how to talk to her. But then I was like, I want to go back. So I was traveling more, and then I would go back into the emergency room. So I was traveling, and then I looked back into the emergency room that last time, and it felt like I was right in her face, and I was trying to tell her that this was beautiful, and she didn't see me, didn't hear me, and then I woke up. And when I woke up, I was a little bit upset in the first split second. In my mind, I said, "Damn, they woke me up." But the first thing I blurted out, and it was pretty immediate, was, "Are you okay?" And I was looking for the woman, that was in the left corner. And you know, what's funny is that a Facebook memory popped up in my feed from me talking about that. And it said that I saw her and she looked exactly the way she did when I was looking at her from above and she was still holding her face. I totally must have blacked that out or because I didn't. You know what it is that when I was above, she looked like my aunt. She looked like a family member. But when I came back into my body, it was a young lady. It wasn't. So I don't think that I even allowed it to register that it was the same person. You know what I'm saying? But she was holding her face the same way that she was when I was out of her body, but she just didn't feel like the same person. So
Who was she, by the way?
when I was outside of my body, I was pretty certain it was my aunt, my mother's twin sister, who she passed a little bit after I had my experience, you know. But when I opened my eyes and I and I can remember her, I can remember her face now. It was a younger lady, and she didn't look like she did when I was from above, when I was floating above. Yeah.
Wow. So what was it like when you came back into your body? A lot of people talk about jolts, or what did
It,
that feel like? And were you happy to be back in your body, or were you not? Like,
I wasn't happy, not initially. I wanted to go back. Even if it was just to finish traveling, where I was traveling and feeling how I was feeling, I didn't. Like I said, the first thought was, "Damn, they woke me up," and and I was upset for that moment. But then I was immediately concerned about the woman and the guy holding the defibrillator pass because I asked him if he was okay as well, And that was when I started, when I heard somebody on this, that's when I started realizing that I had died, like in my mind, because there was somebody on the right asked me, they said, "You didn't feel that?" And I was about to say feel what, but I looked down and I saw this gel pad on my chest that had the indentions of the defibrillator pads on it. I guess it was to keep from burning my skin. So and I had an immediate thought like, damn, you did die. You know, you just died. Like that was real. You know, and it just flooded into my mind that that's what happened. You know, but some weird stuff happened. You know, when I opened up my eyes, I was lucid. I wasn't. It wasn't I wasn't groggy. I immediately opened my eyes and said, "Are you okay?" You know, and then I asked the guy holding the defibrillator pads, "Are you okay?" You know, there was no grogginess, and I met a doctor who said that that's not normal. He said usually when you wake up from a heart attack from being defibrillated after your heart stops, you're not, you know, very lucid. And he said that's weird, you know, in and of itself. But for me, it was instant. And then there was never any change in my awareness. Like there was never from the point that I was before I died through leaving my body and coming back in, I was that. I was that awareness. And it was so there was never any shift or and even when I was back in my body, I was in the same state in terms of calmness that I was when I was dying. It was just I was calm. And so there really never was I never the trauma of it was just trying to catch my breath, you know, in the moments before I passed out. But that was as deep as it went as far as trauma of that moment. Just trying to catch my breath. That was it was the funny part about it is that having drowned as a child, um, the way that I had my heart attack because the valve, my aortic valve ripped, it felt the same. So it felt like I was just drowning again. And what I knew from that is that you're just gonna pass out. And there was nothing for me to really be panicking about anyway, because I couldn't catch my breath and I knew I was just gonna pass out. It wasn't gonna be any trauma. And that might have been why I was calm. I don't know, but I never really panicked, even as I was assuming that this could be death. I just was treating it like I was going to sleep. You know, I said the last thought that I had was this is gonna be some beautiful sleep. And I rolled over on my side and I passed out.
Uh,
And, yeah.
So what was it like? So the body has all this trauma. You were raised with all this trauma, and then you leave the body. What happens to all that trauma when you leave the body? And then what about when it comes back, when you come back? Uh,
Yeah.
You know, was the trauma still there? You know, the stuff we store, or was it gone for a while and it came back later? What happened with that?
Yeah. Well, when I left, there was no attachment to the personality, the trauma, any of it, the identity, any of it. So when I came back, I realized that if I, do I want to be attached to trauma? Do I want to be attached to stories that haven't really served me in my life very well, that ultimately led to me feeling things that made me sick? Do I want to reattach myself to that narrative? And I didn't. So when I came, yes, the stories and the experiences are part of David's life, you know, but when I left here, David was dead. David's mind, body, and ego was dead. So I was something else, and that something else didn't have a connection with that. And so for me, coming back here into this body it's just an opportunity to see that to see my story differently. It's just for me now, it's a lesson. It's I can if I talk to somebody that knew me before and they speak about me in a way that is negative, um, I accept that because the way that I was negative, you know, and I don't have any desire to really defend the way that I was before. It's just a lesson for me. It's a story about a person who who perhaps had good intentions in his life, but started feeling way too much, and died and killed himself. You know what I'm saying? And you, for me, it's a warning. It's a narrative that anybody can hear, and they're not that far gone. Like most people that I meet who feel like they're really struggling in life, they're not killing themselves with their thoughts. You know, they're not sick already badly, like digestive issues and having surgeries because of their thoughts yet. So they're not as far gone as I was. So sometimes for me, hearing people speak about their experience and what they're struggling with, it's easier to help them than it was for me to have ever to get any help, because I was certain in my delusion. I was smart, considered a genius, so there wasn't anything in me that was going to change. I was certain, so for me, talking to other people who aren't experiencing things to the extremes that I was experiencing it or thinking and feeling, it's easy to kind of talk them off. Don't go that route. I can tell you exactly how that ends. It's painful and it's slow, and you're not gonna, you're gonna need some help. And I think for me, that was another part, is accepting that I needed help, accepting that I needed other people. I needed to see examples of what it is that I wanted to be and how I wanted to behave that was counter to how I had been behaving. So
Yeah, that actually brings up a good thing. So what did the NDE do for you? Because as you know, a lot of people think you come back, have an NDE, and now you're just all healed and you're all knowing and it's all perfect.
yeah,
What talk a little bit about that and what that feels like. And do you still have to heal stuff? What was maybe healed on the other side? What do you still have to heal? And re-emphasize that you make these choices every
yeah,
day, because I think
yeah,
that's important.
yeah. And I think for me, that's the self-awareness part is the biggest part for me. Um, Becoming aware of this other part of my anatomy, this awareness thing, the soul thing, experiencing that soul thing. Experience, because we talk about soul and spirit in our spiritual practices, but I, to experience it is, for me, was confirmation that all of the spiritual texts are true. We may come to these, a lot of these true different angles, but I value every one of them now. And I see, and it made me, the immediate thing that it did to me, Sean, was to just open up my orientation, completely open it up. Like there's nothing that I would not entertain, in terms of an idea in this space, now. But my attention, for the most part, is on a timeline that I see us moving towards. It's an option, but we have to behave. And my attention is on that. I saw a negative timeline when I had my NDE as a child, and it hurt me. It broke me. It made me not want to participate in life. But this timeline that I see is part of what gives me hope now moving forward, because I do see an end. And I think that the only way that end happens is if we cooperate. And so some of the friction and tension and wars and stuff that I see now, I just view them as bumps in the road, because what I see at the end has to be the result of us waking up and getting it. It's not something that can happen without that. So, and I see it, and I see it to the point where seeing it gives me goosebumps and makes my hair stand up. So, I think it's a real thing or real option for us.
And that's really nice. I mean, that's more what we should have left everyone with, but since you're here talking now, it's very cool. I mean, that you have this positive, you've seen a glimpse of how wonderful it can be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So no matter what's happening, no matter how people think I perhaps should feel about what's happening around me, um, what I see is all of those things resolved. So I'm not going to entertain us in a state that is beneath where I already see us arriving at. Like we're getting there in my mind. So I'm not entertaining a whole lot of, I'm not going to direct a lot of my energy and feelings towards us in a state where we just don't get it. I know we're going to get it. So that's where my energy is where we got it. And that's, for me, that's another lesson that I learned from dying, is that the things that I hated in this life are the things that I put all my attention on. And that's why I had a whole lot of experiences with those things. It's because all of my creative capacity was directed at things that I hated. And and I was expecting to create a beautiful life with that. And now that's not my orientation. What I want out of this experience, the beautiful things that I see, that's where my attention is. And if I can resolve problems along the way, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to kill myself thinking about problems the way that I used to. You know, it's just an opportunity to fix something. You know, you get dopamine.
So,
You get
and you're
dopamine rushes from that.
and you're clearly saying that where we put our attention, what we focus on is what grows larger, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody wants us to feel so much about all the negative things that's happening. Everybody wants our attention to be on these things. And when we're triggered, we seem to want other people to be triggered like us, because if they're not triggered like us, they don't care. But what we don't realize is that you don't think clearly in a triggered state. You release negative chemicals into your body when you're in those states, and you ultimately are negatively impacting your ability to even solve those problems by staying in that state versus maybe just feeling something, um, understanding that that isn't good, and now you want to change the thing that made you feel that. What I did was to feel something, and I just felt it and felt it and felt it and felt it, and never developed any uh, knowledge, uh, just another or solutions. I just felt and felt and felt until I had almost driven myself crazy, and literally driven myself crazy. And because there was no in your amygdala, in your lower brain, you don't have executive functioning, you don't have reasoning, you don't have logic. So if that's where I'm at all the time because I'm constantly triggering myself with my own attention, then I'm not even allowing myself access to those higher faculties. So I'm not doing that stuff to myself anymore. And I would not, if I'm feeling a certain way, I'm not gonna transfer that to other people. I'm not gonna make people feel what I feel if it's not good, because that doesn't help anything, you know.
Yeah. Um, so what would you say for young people who are feeling hopeless and disempowered based on the insights that you had? What would you say to those young people right now that are, so into identity politics and all that, that are really afraid for their future? What would you say to them?
Yeah, for me, um, there's only two. To me, there's two orientations in this life, and they're tethered to our stories. They're tethered to our bodies and brain function. And one is hope and responsibility, and the other is fear and anxiety. Um, I think that if people are upset about how something is happening, you have to have an image in your mind on how you think it could happen or should happen, and you need to focus your attention on that and keep your awareness on that. Learn what you need to learn the habits that you need to exhibit in order to reinforce that idea and to make that idea become that idea. Like I think sometimes, um, and for me especially, like I became the thing that I hated. I became the thing that I was feeling, the hate. I felt hate, I became hate. I felt disappointment, I became disappointment. But the only way to counter disappointment is hope. The only way to counter, hopelessness is hope. So you're not going to change a situation by just constantly just ruminating over it, because you're just going to repeat it. Because I've said it a few times now, but because I believe from my experience, my attention created it. And so my attention now isn't doing those things anymore. And I'm experiencing this life differently. And I don't often get triggered the way that I used to. I can think through problems. I can decide how I want to respond to people versus automatically reacting from some triggered state based upon preconceived ideas that I've stuffed myself with and I'm full of. You know, now I've pretty much emptied myself of a lot of the ideas that I value before, or just a lot of ideas in general, so that if somebody is in front of me, I am consuming what they are presenting to me and not having to navigate a bunch of internal nonsense as I'm trying to entertain what somebody else is saying to me. So there's not much inside of me that conflicts with people outside of me. So it's easy for me to connect with anybody because I'm just talking to them about what they're sharing with me and not a bunch of stuff that I'm waiting to say. I'm just waiting to get this out. I'm waiting to because I'm triggered and I just want you to feel the way that I feel. You know, none of that's there anymore. So I just listen and ask questions more and I hope to learn to get better at that, to better at listening and asking questions and being humble about um what I don't know, which is a lot because I don't really necessarily have an attachment to what it is that I knew before because it didn't serve me well. I was dead. They killed me. You know, so
So would you say so you're almost more like the observer now, and you don't have that attachment to that story of what David was
yeah.
and all of those things that David thought was true. So you don't get triggered as much. Do you get triggered though very often?
No, I'm trying to think what the so there are times like if I'm in a conversation and I'm trying to navigate or trying to find the words instead of feel the words. When I'm trying to find words, I can get triggered because usually when I'm trying to find words, I'm talking to somebody that does have polar views and I'm trying not to offend them. So in those situations, sometimes I feel what that person is feeling, which is triggered, and I can feel my body responding to that because I'm trying to find words to keep us from clashing or to keep them from being further triggered, you know. And but I'm getting even that's it. I'm getting better at navigating all of that stuff because I just know what's mine and what's not mine these days. And could you excuse me for one quick second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and keep putting your questions in the chat. We have a lot of great questions. And David loves questions. So feel free to keep putting them in the chat.
Sorry about that.
No worries. All good. Okay, so what were we talking about? Yes, how
Being
do you
triggered.
know about being triggered? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not no, I don't really get triggered as much anymore. I think the main thing is that I don't carry a whole lot of bias about people anymore. Um, I just deal with the person that's in front of me, and I don't there is no history attached to. If I don't know you, there's no history, so there's really nothing you can say that can trigger me. I don't attach you to any previous orientation that I may have had. I don't attach any individual to any ideology that I may have had. You know, I don't know you, so it's more of a questioning and learning um, approach than it is any kind of assumptions or feeling anything about a stranger is not necessary. You know, the more necessary thing is to learn the person in front of you, you know, than it is to feel anything about a stranger, you know. So I don't really get triggered too much.
How do you feel about those people back in Yancey and other places that were awful people? And do you see them differently now? Like back then, you could feel the hate and stuff from them. How do you see those types of people now?
Um, when I see people, like if I saw myself now uh, in the state that I was in, I would just think about how much pain and trauma this person must feel to carry that anger, to carry that kind of hate. And that's kind of how I see people now in that way. I think about their story, what led them to that, what led them to that, like what happened in their life to make it easy for them to carry hate in that way or to express that those things. And it's usually not a good story. You know, anybody that can carry hate that way have felt it. They've experienced it. They've experienced trauma on some level, and that's why it's easy to dish it out. But for me, um, having experienced the extremes to what it did to me, I don't want anybody to feel it. I don't care who they. I don't want anybody. I don't want to contribute to anybody feeling the way that I felt. I don't want to plant a seed that could lead to someone feeling the way that I felt because it was a long process of me dying from those feelings, and I don't want to contribute in any way whatsoever to that. And hmm, there was another thing I wanted to say, and it slipped my mind. But yeah, I don't see others and theys anymore. And it just makes it easy for me to communicate with anybody. Here's what I was thinking, but I also think about how when I was young, my brother was always brilliant. He math whiz, just was brilliant. Looked up to him all my life. He taught me about the constellations and uh the Greek gods and the Egyptian gods when we were children. Like I might have been 5, 6 years old. He knew all the constellations and stuff, and that stuff always amazed me. And then I was after I was 6, I had the drowning in the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Um, I was interested in nuclear energy, and I had opinions about uranium. I didn't want. I was like, why are we using uranium? There are other less volatile, elements we could be using besides uranium, thorium as an example. And these are thoughts that I had as a young man that I was fixated on: black holes, thorium versus uranium, nuclear energy, cleaner nuclear energy with less half-time life. I wanted this place to move in better directions as a child, but I didn't feel included. So I think that sometimes I think I would have been a scientist. I think I would have been passionate about working towards solving some of the energy problems, the like things, all of that stuff was the stuff that was on my mind. Deep cosmology and, and stuff like that. How black holes function. When I was about 19, I drew a picture about how black holes function. 9 years later, I see a article from NASA that is explaining what I was explaining about how black holes function. Because my theory was that they couldn't be random and they had to somehow form some kind of system and do something. And the different density black holes did different things, and there's some black holes that moved and some were fixed. Like I had all these thoughts about this as a child, a young man that, I know that this is where I would have been headed had I felt like my contributions would have mattered. And I think that when I think about that, there are so many people, there are like soldiers who return and have skill sets, but they're so traumatized and there's no way to integrate them back into society. Their gifts, their skills get lost. Women who get traumatized and don't have their PTSD and the issues that are associated with their trauma addressed, their contributions we don't get them. You know what I'm saying? Because we don't help them heal and reintegrate back into society. Same thing with African Americans and any other population of people that is more vulnerable and not really centered in this culture. The contributions don't get added into the society, and we all suffer for that. So for me, it's like, it's not just a racism hurts us, it hurts everybody. People's contributions don't get added. Women's contributions are not being added. Soldiers who are returning from war, their contributions are not being added because we're not looking at this trauma thing and it's healing our brain thing, properly,
Yeah. Oh, wow. So many questions as you're going. But I want to go back just again to those people, the people that once you hated, if that's the right word. How are
Yeah.
you now? Like, what I want you to speak about is like how you see them now, like compassionately and differently
Hmm.
than almost like, there's that saying when Jesus was on the cross, forgive them for they know not what they do. And for many people after NDE, they see these people that were persecuting them or whatever, and they just didn't know any better.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that way, but I also take into consideration that I was raised in a town of what, maybe 3,000 people. Like, what's my sample? My sample isn't large enough for me to conclude anything about the entire race of white people. I haven't experienced the entire race of white people. So that's another part of what happened from my experience, is that if I can't feel something that's not rooted in reality. I can't say everybody of this race is anything if I haven't met but 0.1% of them, 0.5% of them. You understand? So now I just look at it like my experiences was this. Um, and also I look at how this culture seems to be hell bent on creating racial polarization, age polarization, gender polarization, gender, sexual preference polarization. Like, every difference that we have, it's presented as a us against them versus this is just how we all look and this is how we all behave. And it ranges from all of these. It has all of this shit in it, excuse the language, but it's just all of it is us. And if we looked at it as all of it is us, then there is no reason, there's no gap between anybody. It's just, oh, that's him expressing us in that way. That's her expressing us in that way. I mean, there's nothing to judge there. It's just information for me now.
Yeah.
It's data, you know. And I don't have enough data to speak about entire populations of any demographic. So I just can't make statements like that anymore. I can't feel things like that anymore because it's not rational. It's not rooted in reality. And not many people have met enough people in any given sample that they feel deeply about to make sweeping statements about it. And then
Right.
the information that we have, the news is polarizing, the history that we get is polarizing, and often not the truth. So all of our opinions oftentimes are based upon extreme information that's polarizing and polarized from its inception. And it doesn't really allow you to have balanced views and perspectives and open orientations. And I'm just not going to allow that stuff to be centered in my life anymore because I can choose how I want to deal with my attention and have this experience. And I don't have to hate anybody, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also, as you and I were a month or two, I don't know how long ago, uh, you see a day when there is no separation, when there is no racial differences. You saw that in your NDE, correct?
Yes. Well, yeah. Yeah. It's a timeline that I see now most of the time. Like, I don't not see it. Like, if I'm, that's just, it's what I am. It's that part of what I see that's in me. That's if there's a function that I have in this universe, it would be to push the ball in that direction, towards oneness and us realizing that in this life on this planet and understanding that that's what we have always aspired to. There's been war on this planet for a long time, but there's also been all of the religions. There wouldn't be any religions, and there wouldn't even be any loyalty or faith to any of these things if it wasn't for an underlying desire for us to walk upright. And that's what the ancients were trying to convey, is that here's how to walk upright. We just repeat the stories instead of learning lessons from them.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to, because your love of the stars and astronomy, I wanted to go back to that for a minute because the way you also loved flying around in your NDE. What is so cool about NDEs, one of the coolest things I think, is that we can do whatever we want. When you
Yeah,
come back, you see, you want to go do that, you can. There is nothing stopping you because it's all your beliefs. So if you want to go become a big astronomer, you can. There's nothing
yeah,
stopping you. And I think that is one of the coolest things that those of us that have experienced NDEs, like we can cram as many lifetimes as we want into one.
yeah,
If you didn't take this opportunity when you were younger, nothing's stopping you now.
yeah. Yeah, I think for me, the accountability part is it once you realize that that's you are creating your experience, then from there, the next logical step is agency to create your experience. You have that agency. You have agency to decide excuse me, what you want from this experience and to do and to create it and to experience it. So taking the accountability and some of it is patriarchy. Patriarchy is an outside in, orientation. Uh, the more ancient orientations were inside out orientations. So it was more intuitive for them that their inner world was linked to their outer world. And whereas our orientation is outer in. So it's not as intuitive for us to realize that our thoughts influence our reality. We seem to, in our minds, experience it the opposite, but it's just not the truth. We've been coaxed into thinking a certain way, into having certain orientations from birth. You're given a religion, you're given a political affiliation, you're told your race, you're told how you're supposed to feel about X, Y, and Z, and then so to think that we're choosing any of this stuff at some point is it's not really happening. We're not really having authentic experiences until we wake up and realize that we do have agency. We are accountable for our own experience here, and it's time to choose some for ourselves. Some of this stuff.
Yeah. One of the lessons you learned was death was a transition into a different state. There is no death. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. When I was going into the hospital, like I knew that my heart was stopping. Like I knew that it wasn't beating right. I knew that I couldn't breathe. Um, um, and when I laid on the gurney, I knew that I probably wasn't going to be conscious for much longer, But I don't really know how anxious I was about dying in that moment. I don't know. I'd had when I had my gallbladder removed, I had a TIA, I guess a minor stroke, you know. And in that moment, I thought, kind of the similar thing is like I think my body could perhaps stop working, but I still didn't really think about my body not working as death, you know. Because when I was having a stroke, I wasn't controlling it. My hands were clamping together, my mouth was drooping, I couldn't talk clearly, and I had another strange spiritual experience having a stroke. I had what felt like electricity move up the back of my arm, across the back of my shoulders, down the back of this arm. It came back up and went to the back of my neck. It came up the back of my neck and it went to the top of my head. And then I heard like a pop inside of my skull. And then it felt like the electricity was pouring down my body like water. Like it was water all over me, and it felt like electricity. And I was standing there, and the lady was kind of talking me through I guess, protocol to see if I'm having a stroke. And I'm getting impatient with her, because I'm like, I'm having a stroke, you know, and you're asking me to smile, and you're asking me questions about my fingers. And I'm not controlling my fingers right now. And so I was getting impatient with her. And so I told her, could you please go get someone? Because this isn't going to get any better. And I laugh at almost every experience I've had now because all of it to me is just part of a story that led me to peace, to happiness, no matter how many detours and how much pain and confusion I experienced in that story. It's a happy ending for me. I'm happy, and I am aware of this part of my anatomy that I call attention. And that's what I experienced when I left my body. So there is nothing uh, in me that believes that death is what occurs, because I didn't experience that. It was seamless, and I never at any point lost awareness. So for me, that thing that I was is what I am, and that's it's attention, it's awareness, it's uh and it's just in these bodies. And David's story now for me just confirms that. It led me to knowing that. And that's now this life is beautiful, and it's an opportunity to move in it with that knowing. And that knowing doesn't allow trauma to be accumulated. It doesn't allow bias to be accumulated. It doesn't allow my orientation to close to where any concept that I value doesn't apply to all 8 billion plus humans on this planet. If the concept that I value doesn't apply to all 8 billion people on this planet, then I probably don't value it, because it ultimately will lead to some kind of polarization that will ultimately be violent. And for me, that's just the basis of violence on this planet to me is theys and others, and I just don't do that. I don't think that they exist. I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah.
So back to the when you were 6, when you drowned. Uh, what do you think the significance is of that? And how did that play a role to this one? Do you see correlations yet? Do you see
Yeah.
reasons?
Well, it was a very it was a very non-traumatizing experience. I didn't even talk about it as a drowning until like my brother and I got him to confirm it probably now about 6 months ago. Because I just remembered it as something that happened, But but when I thought more about it and I got him to confirm, he said that I was under the water no less than 3 or 4 minutes. I remember black, it was black. I remember at some point not seeing the light at the top of the water anymore, and everything was black. And then it was just a different black. And then I heard a voice say, if you touch the bottom, you could just push yourself back up. And it was a peaceful voice that almost sounds like my voice now, and when I pushed myself, I mean, when he said that if you touch the bottom, you can push yourself back up, I said, well, I'm not. It doesn't seem like I'm going to touch the bottom. I'm just going down. And when I said that, I stopped going down and I started floating back up. And as I'm floating up, I look up and I can see the light coming in through the top of the water. And then I see, and all of this is beautiful to me. I see a splash, and I can see the circles radiating from the center of the splash. And I stare at that for a while, the way that I stared at the star forming region, when I was out of my body. It was just beautiful. Um, and then I put my hand in the middle and I hit the pole and they pulled me out. When they pulled me out, my brother said I coughed a couple times. I remember sighing. I remember going, and that was really it. There was no pumping water out of me or anything. And then the kids, everybody behind me was panicking and crying. So when I turned around and looked at the people, I cried because they scared me because I didn't realize anything traumatic happened other than, I needed some help to get out of the water, but outside of that, I wasn't traumatized. The voice was calming. Uh, I if I did pass out, I woke back up when I was floating back up, and it wasn't a negative experience. But those rings, those radiating circles, that's what's now become very important to me, to the point where I see that as a symbol of the smaller circle becoming large. you know, it's my life. I understood love, I understood loyalty, I understood protecting what I valued, but only in my tribe. My experience made me see those same concepts as it related to 8 billion of us. So that circle to me, and as it relates to my recent experience, is it that circle became pretty much the theme of my recent near-death experience, is that the small circle becomes larger. Our orientations have to become more open if we're going to fix the problems that exist in this world. So the theme that I see that carry from that is just that circle, you know, yeah, that circle
Was that
radiating.
when you experienced a past life then that you got a glimmer of it?
Well, I have been having. I was a weird kid, Sean. So I've been having, I've been having what I thought were dreams. I used to call them recurring dreams when I became a teenager, and but they were, after I had my near death experience, they became more vivid, and but it was still kind of the same scenarios, maybe a little bit more information, and then I realized that they weren't dreams; they were like memories, and they were kind of similar to my life review. My life review was very quick. It was a glimpse of some faces and feelings. It wasn't like a whole laid out story, or how some people say they see this stuff on literal screens. It was just a feeling right before I left this planet, and then I was and that was it. And it might have been 4 seconds long. And that's the same thing that I remember from those previous lives, is what they seem to be, is the ends of them. One of them was a, a soldier in China. Uh, Definitely feel like China. And I was a courier. I didn't have a rifle. I had a pistol and a bag, and I could just deliver messages from one field to the battlefield to the next. And I just seemed to see the end of his life. I get to a tent, and it seemed either there was an explosion or I got shot, and it because it blacks out once I open the tent. And and I was a woman in Paris. Oh, there's a memory, and there's another way to, because it doesn't always, for me, some of the language that we use becomes too self-referencing, and it attaches, it makes the same thing that I did to convince myself that this experience was horrible. On the flip side of that is, by wrapping stories and narratives up around your identity, it can be confusing as well. So I don't necessarily speak on these as if this is me, necessarily, but these are memories that I
Yeah,
have.
it's easy to trade one story for another story.
Exactly, exactly, and and I don't want to. I'm not. It's all information, all of it. This entire beautiful experience, and if I had 1,000 other ones, it's all just information to help me navigate this current one more gracefully. It's all just information. So,
But I
and it
think
was,
what's cool about, like, so the French one, which if you want to share a little bit more, is why do we experience these? Why do we
yeah,
experience all these different lives, different genders, different races,
yeah.
different what's your thoughts on that?
I just think that's how it works. I think that's how this place works. What I will never do is share a lot of conclusions about how this reality works, because I've heard too many NDEs and I've heard too many explanations of how this experience works for me to think that you can distill all of that down into this is how reality works. It's too vast. So for me,
How about for you? What was the significance of being that
I think
white French woman?
yeah, it's time. I think it's cycles in time, and I think there are going to be consistent themes in each life. Um, what can say, from the woman to the Chinese guy to even other memories that are older, um, the themes that are consistent is that I struggle, um, and then I gain favor, and but I don't. Um, I don't know, but I can look at the themes and across previous experience and memories that I have, and it's just consistent. Um, and the struggle part is always there. Not feeling connected to this life is always there. Having almost a photographic memory is always there.
So then you
Having,
notice a theme with each life, that there's similar themes,
yeah,
maybe of
being,
things that you've chosen to learn.
yeah, spirituality is always there. The woman was very spiritual to the point where when she was killed, she was already familiar with how to behave outside of the body. She chose not to look back at her death because she didn't want to, and she just kept on. So, but I remember just seeing it before it happened and as I was coming out of the body, you know. So I saw it, and it was ugly. It was a daytime murder on the side of a road in a black car. And I remember her experience differently than the others, almost like it was the last one or something. And it feels like it's something that still bothers me. Her experience still bothers me. So there's some healing there, I guess, that still needs to perhaps happen, integrating.
Yeah. Um, so why don't you tell us a little bit about all this trauma and how you have been dealing with it? Since you came back into the body, we still got all this trauma. We just have a clearer picture of it. How are you integrating your trauma and integrating this NDE and grounding? Share some of those techniques, because you have a lot of great techniques for
Yeah.
NDEers to try.
A lot of it is people like you having the opportunity to reshare my life and my story and my experiences. That's a big part of it because the same intensity that I studied all these spiritual books and philosophies and stuff with my whole life. Now I'm looking at the patterns in my own life with that same intensity, and I'm seeing our lives are our holy book. Like our lives show us who we are. Our lives show us better than anything who we are, because regardless of who you think you are, you're going to do what you're going to do here. And most of the time, people assume themselves to be uh, examples of their faith. But the biggest thing that a lot of perfect examples of their faith do is accuse other people of not being good examples of anything, and that accusatory tone is not that's not a reflection of being an example of any faith. If you look at the etymology or the connection between the word devil and accuser, that's what the devil is the accuser. So oftentimes we end up in not learning the behavior that goes along with the titles. We end up exhibiting behaviors that are antithetical to the titles that we try to profess that we are, valuing, that we value in this life. But you got to know what you're doing. You got to know these traditions, and you got to know that they are a lot older than we think, and they've been this polarization is a lot older than we think too. And the trauma that goes along with belief is a lot older than we think. And we just have to, honestly, in my opinion, it's just time to start moving towards fixing that stuff. It's time to fix all of that stuff, you know.
Yeah. So what we're getting towards the time to close. And I just want to let everybody know, if your questions weren't answered, if you go in the Hawaiian IANDS Facebook group, you can go to the replay of the video. You can type your questions there, and then David can go and answer more of them.
Oh,
Just because we had a lot of great questions. Go ahead.
I didn't go like the trauma stuff for me. Part of it, so part of it to me is healing your story, viewing your own life with the same like the same intensity that I was studying these books and trying to learn the truth. Like my life became that for me, and I started seeing patterns. I started remembering, and and I started fixing stuff. I started, where in my life did I forget that I already knew this, and then what idea that I replaced my birth knowing with some new knowing that is not adequate. Another thing that I'm very aware of now that I wasn't aware of before is just my body. It's paying attention. I've had heart issues. I've had hypertension. I've had my gallbladder removed. So now I'm in my body and I pay attention to my body a lot. One thing that I owe myself that I never allowed myself to experience before is a flat nervous system. I will not allow myself to be easily triggered because I was so easily triggered before that to me, that's just, it's almost disrespectful to my anatomy. It's disrespectful to my spirit at this point to not grant myself that peace, to not grant myself a flat nervous system and the opportunity to respond gracefully to external stimuli versus just autopilot responding, automatic responses and triggered responses. So those are the things that I focus on the most in my trying to heal is I owe myself a flat nervous system. I don't owe myself these stories that I used to tell myself that triggered me. I don't know. I don't allow myself to tell stories about reality anymore. It's only what I'm experiencing is that's the data that I use to, to navigate this, not what I feel about it,
So what's the biggest trick then when you feel yourself getting triggered? What do you do that everybody here could try?
First thing is if I feel my nervous system, I feel my stomach doing some tightening up, I feel heart rate picking up, feel any kind of constriction anywhere, I just breathe. I breathe and I acknowledge the fact that in that state, my response probably will be an automatic response. It will be something that won't reflect my true intentions. It won't be as graceful as it could be because my body is triggered. And just being aware that my body is triggered, I'm not going to aggressively engage in any kind of conversation, or I'm not going to engage in conversation that requires a lot of reflection because I know in that state I can't provide that. So if I have to dismiss myself or to just say, hey, let's talk about this later, I just give myself, I'm a lot more graceful in handling when to speak and when not to speak based upon what's happening inside of me, versus before you say something, I'm triggered, auto response. And it might not be good at all because it's just the response that I'm used to giving every single time it happens. And I'm not even thinking about it. It's just, there's a button that you pushed and here's the response to that. What happens when you push that button? I just don't have those buttons anymore. Now, even if I do have them, I still give myself a gap of either at the very least taking a deep breath, and thinking of a response instead of just reacting.
So the first thing is acknowledge that you're triggered.
Acknowledging that you're triggered. And then there's a lot of disciplines that you can engage in to calm yourself. Like I use mudras. There's certain mudras you can learn these. You can just Google them, mudras to calm your nervous system. I press different parts of my hand. I take deep breaths. A lot of different things, but my goal always is to slow my heart rate down, slow my breathing down, and to slow my thoughts down. And I just call it just keeping myself flat. It's keeping my nervous system flat so that there's no noise that's keeping me from having a real response instead of just a triggered reaction,
Yeah. So what is the number one message, if you have one, that you would like everybody here tonight to take home from your experience?
I've become very focused on the idea, because a lot of people are like spiritual gifts, and those things are given for people who have if you take psychedelics and you have a different experience, if you have an NDE, anything that changes your energy is going to probably come with some kind of gift, if that's what we call them, or basically our natural the normal ways that we function become more evident to us, basically. I think because I was a child, I was having lucid dreams and having sleep paralysis and I always called it knowing things that I wasn't supposed to know. I was knowing things that I wasn't supposed to know as a child, and and it didn't serve me, and I didn't want it. I asked God to stop me from having these experiences and stop me from knowing stuff that I wasn't supposed to know. And and that's not, you know, that's a confused child's response to natural human abilities. So for me now, when people speak, sometimes they want to hear fantastical stuff, mystical stories. Uh, there's mystical stuff happening all the time. Like I don't know how I know certain things, and they only, you know, so I don't. I mean, but I don't care about that. Like because what I know is that it's not going to be God returning that rights this ship. And it's not, we can't blame demons for the ship getting taken off course. We did it and we got to fix it. Our behavior is what needs to change here. It's not our mystical powers. It's not our ability to heal people with our hands. It's not our ability to see the future. It's our behavior. It's treating each other decently. That's what's going to change things here. So for me, a lot of the times I can even forget that that you know if there's an interesting part of the story, most of the time it's the mystical, magical, spiritual stuff. But the reality of what's happening here is that it's bad behavior. It's bad human behavior here, and that's what needs to get fixed. You know, centric thinking. Um, you know, our orientations aren't open. A lot of conclusions that we have about reality that shouldn't even exist. We don't know enough about reality to have some of the conclusions that we have. We don't even know enough about history to have some of the conclusions that we have about history. We don't know enough about the texts that our religions come from to be so passionate and willing to kill each other over ideas that we're not really firm in. You know, so for me, it's just behavior, behavior. We got to be more aware, self-aware. You got to allow yourself that time between reacting and responding, so that you actually can be more graceful in this life. We need to stop recreating trauma. Like you experience trauma, you don't heal, and you spread it. You know, like we got to stop doing it. I did that for 40 years, and I don't. I know that's not the way to be on this planet. So for me, it's our behavior has to get better. We got to reduce our orientation. This whole they and others orientation has to get down. You know, have to turn the volume down on that if we're gonna have any chance on moving forward in this experience in the way that I see it happening. So
Beautiful. That is such a wonderful message to leave everyone with. And I want to remind everybody that you can go in Hawaiian IANDS and ask David more questions. And you can join us February 17th and ask him more questions there, because he's got a lot of wisdom to share. What do you want to share, David?
I want to say this because you are amazing, and people don't understand what you go through in the back end of all of this. I appreciate you. I appreciate how, you know, I mean, how selfless you are in doing this, and I encourage everybody to please give Sean some kind of donation because he doesn't expect it. He doesn't ask for it really that much. I'm gonna make him start asking for it, because I think that the only way for us to be able to really share this stuff the way that we want to, like I don't even want to have a 9 to 5. I actually want to be able to write books and do courses and speak to people all day, every day. Like I would prefer to live my life that way. Sean is providing platforms. He has 800,000 people that it costs money to maintain sites. It costs money to pay for marketing, the brand. It's time doing all of these flyers. Sean is so well presented. He presents things so professionally, very well. He needs some help. Please, let's help Sean, y'all.
Thank you,
and
David.
thank you. Yeah,
It's my pleasure. This is after my NDE. This is my purpose. And I'm grateful to you and Loretta and Jack and Susan and all the people that help us carry on these messages, because it's so important, as you know. But I really appreciate you and everybody coming tonight. And please join us February 17th. It's going to be an amazing Saturday. And then our sharing group. And then if you're interested in learning mediumship, we're going to be doing 2 really cool classes with Michelle Claire. So I just want to say aloha Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Loretta and Jack and Susan, for helping moderate everything. And we will see you all soon.
Take care, everybody.